This video is for entertainment purposes only. Do your own research.
From UFOs to weird things we know, it's time for the paranormal, strange, phenomenal show. Biometric wars, a prison planet run by the man. It's time for the Tinfoil Canadian. Take off your hose!
Hello, fellow foilers, and welcome to the 16th episode of the Tinfoil Canadian, the show where the government files are redacted and the skies are always active. On today's episode, we continue our Monster and Cryptid Week with the focus on one of the scariest dark beings, the Navajo Skinwalker. Some of the stories in this episode may not be suitable for some viewers, and viewer discretion is advised. With that being said, let's hop on the old skidoo and head on up to the trail, eh?
Skinwalkers are Native American magic users who have committed themselves to the ways of evil and chaos. They represent the antithesis of Navajo cultural values. While community healers were known as medicine men and women, or other positive terms in the indigenous language, witches were seen as evil. They conducted harmful ceremonies and manipulative magic as a corruption of the good work that medicine people traditionally performed. They had the knowledge and ability to do good, but deliberately chose the opposite, engaging in taboo behaviors like murder, cannibalism, incest, and the desecration of anything that Navajo society held sacred. By acting in a way that directly opposed nature, they unleashed evil into the community with the hope of causing social unrest, illness, and death. This is how skinwalkers gained their power. They grew stronger, healthier, and richer by making others weak, sick, and poor. According to anthropologist Clyde Kluckhohn, who's best known for his work among the Navajo, in order to become a skinwalker, you had to know a skinwalker, and to be accepted into the secret society, you had to commit the most evil act of all, the murder of a close family member, most often a sibling. This initiation process also granted new powers to the skinwalker, allowing them to perform certain kinds of dark magic on their own, and even transfigure themselves into a number of different animals.
Now that we are all aware of what the Skinwalker is exactly, let's take a dusty long walk through the desert and see what else we can learn about this terrifying entity.
So the legend of the Skinwalker is 100% to do with the clash between the indigenous people that actually lived here for thousands of years, and then when the colonizers showed up, and that was from different eras. There was Spaniards that came and enslaved a lot of Native Americans and forced them to work in mines to mine out of gold, and then there was battles and wars, and a lot of the Spaniards were killed, and their bodies and all their armor and clothes and weapons and everything were just thrown in the mines, and then the indigenous people would seal the entrance shut and sometimes even booby trap it with kill traps and things to hide all that stuff. And they didn't care about the gold. They didn't care about the metal or any of that the Spanish were digging out. And so they just chucked all of that in these holes, closed them up, and then went back into their daily life until the Mormon pioneers showed up. And then they had to deal with it in a whole new way. See, there's different game trails that just cut up through here in different spots that are all worth following to see what could be up there. But I want to go to the end of the property and work my way back today. But what happened was, when colonizer groups would show up at different times, they would begin to human traffic and slave trade the indigenous people. And the Native Americans here specifically, it would have been the Ute tribe. So the Utes and the Northern Paiutes, the Shoshone, a lot of the different clans that were up here, they were suddenly pressured for their resources and stuff. And they turned to different spiritual methods and rituals, like down in Nevada and across Arizona, and then eventually a huge movement that spread into the Lakota. They started doing the ghost dance, which was like this whole time travel ritual that was in conjunction with the Big Dipper, how it rotates around the North Star, and the 4 directions, north, south, east, and west, and aligning your soul for spiritual protection. Got to keep an eye out for rattlesnakes. So the Paiute and the northern Paiute and the Goshen tribes, a lot of them started doing the ghost dance ritual. So you see all these medicine wheels and ritual stone circles. The Navajo, the Dene, a lot of them were abducted. They were kidnapped and they were slave traded, and they were brought up here and sold into the colonizer families as actual slaves. And they were even sold among each other in different clans and different tribes because the resources and everything suddenly got under extreme pressure when these different people started moving into the valleys and up into the basin. So as all of that was unfolding, the Native American people, the Navajo, the Dene people, started doing rituals also to curse and to protect the land where certain things happened. So like at Skinwalker Ranch, one of the main stories and why the whole legend of the Skinwalker exists there is because there was a Native American woman from the Navajo tribe whose name was Rose or Rosie. And she was kidnapped from her home down in New Mexico on the borders of Arizona there, where kind of by Lake Powell. And she was abducted. Her entire family was murdered. And she was brought back up here and actually kind of sold into an arranged marriage. And that all happened right where Skinwalker Ranch is. And when that occurred, and when Rose was taken from her family and they were all murdered, the Navajo enacted the Skinwalker curse upon that land because of the slave trading, because of the human trafficking, and that Rose specifically was taken up there. She was married to a white man, and they lived there as a family, like as one of the first families there actually at Skinwalker Ranch. And then I think something happened. Her first husband died. She remarried a man that she actually liked, and then they lived their whole life and moved up the valley and is somewhere has died or buried in between Skinwalker Ranch and Blind Frog Ranch. Between that path of where all that happened is literally the place where the original legend of the Skinwalker begins. And that was the whole story. It was based around her. In fact, if we went and talked to Randy at his little art museum earlier at the beginning of this video series, and his wife is the curator at the local museum, and I'm pretty sure at the museum they even have whole displays and information about Rose and Rosie that you can go in and look at that and learn about her. But I think it's really fascinating that when those pressures occurred and when the Native American indigenous people started to get captured, human trafficked, slave traded, and murdered and exterminated, they turned to their spiritual rituals. They turned to projecting guardian spirits upon the land, and they turned to their spiritual ceremonies of time travel, going into the future to try and send a message to protect the place or to guard a place or to keep it from getting destroyed. And then fast forward into our time, and you have Thunderstrike Ranch, have a family living up here and people living up here, and they encounter this phenomena like it's real. And they encounter these apparitions like ghosts of these shaman figures and these Skinwalker type apparitions and these different things, and it's almost like there's something to that magic that actually stuck. Something about what the indigenous people were doing actually happened and is real, or somehow imprinted their energy upon the land, and our perception of space-time is a misunderstanding, so that when we come to these places, the past and the future become very thin. And when you learn how to become self-aware, you suddenly see what all of that is about and you experience it. But I think it's really fascinating how all of that fits together and overlaps. So basically the whole point is, where there's smoke, there's fire. As we're up here hiking around, even though like colonizers, Spanish conquistadors coming up and enslaving them is not directly connected to UFOs, It is exactly why there's potent energy here, why there's deep ancient mystery and history that's all overlap that makes this place like energetically potent. And I think there's spots like this all over the world, but when they're all directly in a line, and then you've got government involvement, like right down at Skinwalker Ranch, you've got deep military, CIA, government involvement. You know, Travis Taylor came out of programs that the DIA and DEA or wherever he came out of, and now you've got Jay Stratton coming out of the Pentagon working there, like, and then you've got Eric Davis, and these guys are all talking about how they've seen entities coming out of portals, and they've seen UFOs, they've seen all of this, how it's interrelated. So it's one thing to see it on the TV show and to watch them all talk about it. It's another thing to come up and find a property like this that you can come and stay in the Airbnb yourself and rent the cabin, and you can go around and experience it without any confusion, without wondering if you're being tricked or hoaxed, without being concerned if it's a government setup or psyop. You can come up here by yourself like I am right now. Nobody has a clue where I'm at. And if I find something, or if I see a UFO, or if I experience some sort of paranormal encounter with an indigenous spirit, even if that's just within my own mind or my own dreams or experience, then I know for myself. I don't have to wait for the government to tell me what's going on. I get the personal validation for myself, and I get the opportunity to share that all with you too. I think that's really cool. So if we find Spanish artifacts, that is still a huge clue as to where the energy around all this trauma, generational trauma, and magic and spiritual energy is focused, and it's all going to apply. So it's really fascinating to see what we can find. And there's definitely drive-ups going all over through here that we got to start exploring now.
I would like to visit the area myself one day, and I had no idea you could rent a cabin there. Many of us have seen the show about Skinwalker Ranch. Do you feel that show is a hoax? Here is a little history about the show and the area that the last clip spoke about.
Sold the property in 1994 to the Sherman family, who desired a place to raise cattle and their family. Shortly after the Shermans acquired the property, they were overwhelmed with not only cattle mutilation events that were occurring with their prized cows, but also poltergeist-like activity and even UFO sightings that were occurring on a pretty regular basis. They were being terrorized. Word filtered out through the community that the Shermans were experiencing this, and they were talking to their neighbors and calling people in. It caught the attention of a journalist at the Deseret News, a guy named Zach Van Eyck, who came out, was convinced that they were credible, that they were telling the truth, and wrote I think several articles detailing the accounts of UFO activity, bizarre cattle mutilations, and other strangeness on the property. Those accounts made their way to one Robert Bigelow in North Las Vegas. Mr. Bigelow had established the National Institute for Discovery Science, a separate side project and program for investigating strange phenomena, including UFOs and cattle mutilation, and he quickly flew in on his private jet, accompanied by Colonel John Alexander, and cut a deal with the Shermans, acquired the property quickly, kept Mr. Sherman on for a short period of time to help with the transition, and his team of scientists not only locked down the whole property and secured it, but they proceeded to put up observation towers with bait pens surrounded by razor wire. There are 3 observation towers located across the property that incorporate bait pens, where they would use animals as biosensors to hopefully draw out whatever entities were there on the property, predator-like activity as they described it. And they proceeded to launch a rigorous investigation at the time in 1996 that continued on for years. And of course, years later, the events, the activity, the investigation at Skinwalker Ranch was brought to the attention of officials at the Pentagon. They had several visitors who had experiences, very compelling, undeniable experiences of paranormal activity. And that led to the black budget Pentagon funded program that involved the ranch at its center, and the rest is history. But by 2013, that program had ceased for various reasons. Mr. Bigelow was actively engaged with growing his aerospace company and jumping into the private space race, as we discussed, and the ranch, to a degree, it had faded. At the time, I was led to believe that it was simply because Mr. Bigelow was just was very busy with getting his beam modules and his space habitats up in orbit and ultimately on the moon and Mars, which I believe was true. But also, I've learned he ascribed negative events afflicting his family to really his ownership of the ranch.
Really?
Mr. Bigelow blamed the ranch for dark, disturbing events that happened in their lives. And it's not my story to tell. It's been told by others in the media and advisors, but owning the ranch was not a positive experience for him.
Even before him, though, this went back to Native American tribes. I mean, even in the show,
yeah.
I believe he, correct me if I'm wrong, are they hydroglyphs? Is that what you call them?
Petroglyphs. So
petroglyphs.
There's rock art. There's, we have a megalithic site there as well that we've investigated in the area. But there's a lot of rock art and evidence of the ancients, of the Native Americans working on the property. There's also a strange Masonic symbol that is etched into the face of the mesa that many have claimed symbolizes as above, so below. There are a lot of things relative to the history that are intriguing and a little bit ambiguous, but the Native American history, the tradition, and the fact that the Navajo tribe cursed this property as a result of conflict with the Ute tribe and the federal government is something that has been confirmed over and over by members of the community, by elders, and the ridge that runs the expanse of the property, that mesa plateau or that ridge, has been referred to as Skinwalker Ridge for a very long time. In fact, when the Bigelow team first descended on the property and set up their investigation and heard the accounts of, the curse, the Skinwalker curse, and the lore that surrounded this property, it ultimately was referred to as Skinwalker Ranch as opposed to the Utah Ranch. For a period of time, it was just simply the Utah Ranch or the Bigelow Ranch in Utah, and then took on the identity of Skinwalker Ranch as they just simply started referring to the property as such, as a result of the Native American.
What is a skinwalker?
A skinwalker is a shape-shifting demonic entity. It's essentially a Native American witch or warlock that sells their soul in exchange for immortality, the ability to take on the skin or shape-shift, oftentimes in the form of a wolf, a dire wolf, or a werewolf-like creature, but they can also take on the shape of other animals as well. And it's a topic that I found the Native American community likes to stay away from. They don't like to discuss it. To even say the name Skinwalker is negative.
Okay.
And it's a key part of their cultural tradition and history. Skinwalkers to the Native Americans in the Uinta Basin are just as real as this chair, as this bottle of Diet Mountain Dew. It's a very real part of their cultural history.
Do you guys feel like any areas in Canada are cursed? I am not sure if I know of any truly cursed lands in my area, but for some reason, there are parts of the north end of Kootenay Lake which are very remote and feel dark and distant to me when I am there. Sorry, Trout Lake, but your town gives me the heebie-jeebies, eh?
I'm not here to try to convince you that these things are real. You know, you can believe it or not if you want to, but I know my people in the reservation, they understand and have gone through these things. Well over 300 to 400,000 people, I'm pretty sure about 70 to 80% of them have all experienced something like this growing up. So yeah, that's all I have to really say about that. So what are some darker stories that I have had or experienced? And that's something that a lot of people wanted me to kind of go in more in detail. But for me, it's one of those things I don't want to go down. Again, it's those things really mess with your head when you see what they've done to children, what they do to, you know, capture people, how they sacrifice them and how they do these things. It's bad. I really kind of don't want to go down that route of going more in depth of the process of, you know, how they mutilate human bodies, how they get the skins and everything, what they do to children, and how they steal people and how they witch people and get them sick and everything. It's very, very bad and to the core, and it's something that's really not supposed to be really shared unless it's kind of like on a need to know basis kind of thing. So really what I'm allowed to what I share on here is what I'm comfortable with. That won't really give me nightmares or bring up kind of old memories like that. So yeah, but with that, I will be able to share with you guys one more story that I have. And I know there was another story that I was supposed to tell and everything, but I was told by the elders, no, I can't tell that story. So I'm sorry, everybody. This one right here, though, is going to be one of my first ever encounters that I had with a Yenigloshi. So this story starts out is how every Skinwalker story on the reservation starts out. So one time I went out to my grandma's house. And when I was out there, we were out there we were building a new home. We were building a new Hawan for all the elders and everyone in the family to come visit, for everyone to stay at when they come visit. So when we were there, we were kind of in a rush when we made our way and our plans out there. So we didn't pack enough, I guess you could say, tents or anything. And like I said, we're building a house to be able to stay in there. So I have a huge family, and when we all came out there, you know, there's kind of limited room inside of the one house that we had there. And it was one of those things to where like you ran out of bed space. So I just volunteered to stay out in the truck. My uncle and I decided to stay out in the truck. And for me, I'm 6'5". And for me to sleep inside of a truck, it's a lot better than in a car. But I like to stretch out my legs and everything. So my uncle said, hey, I got an extra cot. You know, why don't you just put it in the bed of the truck? I was like, okay. So I set up the cot, and the sun was starting to go down and everything. So I get the cot and I put it in the bed of the truck. So my uncle and I, whenever we were out there, you know, we kind of spent some time by the fire. We talk about certain experiences that we've had in the spiritual world and certain things that we've seen, and just trying to learn as much as I can from my uncle. So as we're sitting at the fire, you know, we have our tobacco smoke and the sun goes down, and then the darkness overtakes the forest where we're at. So it gets around midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and I start to get really sleepy. So that's when I make my way over to the truck. I'm like, all right, uncle, I'm gonna turn in and go to sleep. He's like, all right, nephew, get your rest. So when I first laid down, I remember just seeing the stars, seeing the galaxy, and just how beautiful it was. And I was just like, it was nice and cool, you know, it was not a lot of bugs or mosquitoes out or anything like that. So it was honestly really nice to be able to just turn in after a long, hard day's work and just lay down underneath the stars. It's one of the first times I've actually done it, and probably the last time I'm going to do it. So when I was sleeping, I remember hearing something behind me. So when I was laying on the cot, if you could imagine the bed of the truck, I would have to say I was eye level with the sides of the truck right next to me. And I had my back turned, I was laying on my side, and I heard some branches crack. And I sensed what felt like heat come over me, over the backside, and it was just burning. If I could explain what evil energy feels like, it's a burning sensation, a hot sensation, and your body is just tingling. And you're just feeling nervous, anxious, and fear starts to overtake your body. You start getting chills, and I hear, and I tried turning, but at this point I knew he used his powers while I was asleep of paralysis on me. So I tried my hardest to turn my head, and I just turned my head to try to see what's there. And it takes everything inside of my body to try and turn and look. And I see a black figure standing over me, and you only see 2 red dots with a silhouette of a coyote head. Right next to it, and I could just smell it. Oh my God, it just stunk. It smelled like death, and I freaked out. And with my body still kind of freaking out at that paralysis, or if that whole thing about, that chemical that makes your body fall asleep to where it makes it fall asleep and you don't act out your dreams was still something. It was one of those things that you're taught as a warrior, and I'm pretty sure all you veterans out there know you have in a sense, a sixth sense that'll wake you up if something comes out, you hear something, sense something in the darkness and in the middle of the night, and you just get up and you're just ready, for whatever happens. That's something that you're kind of taught in the trainings. So that happened, and I turned and looked. So I was sleeping with my sword next to me, and I tried my hardest. I remember my arm felt like it weighed a ton, and I tried to grab my arm and bring it over, and he was slowly starting to reach at me. I touched my sword on my side, and then that's when he got up and he looked at me, and he just turned and ran away. So when I grabbed my sword, immediately that's when all my whole body was able to move freely. That's when I knew it was more of the spiritual side of things, because when you're able to touch your jish, when you're able to touch your weapons like that, and it frees you of that bond or that constriction that you have on you, that's more of a spiritual side of things. And whatever he did, I had to end up getting a ceremony for this afterwards, because while I was sleeping, I woke up and there was some of that bone powder that gets you sick and curses you. So when I grabbed my sword, I got up, and he ended up running into the darkness, and my uncle was sleeping in the truck. So I pounded on the window, and he gets up, and then, he looks around. I was like, Yanagloshi. And then he gets up, and then he gets all his stuff. But that dude was already long gone, because the morning dawn was already coming. And there's always these stories and these teachings of when that morning dawn comes, if you're still in that skinwalker form, you're stuck in that animal you are when the sun hits you. So that one right there was very scary for me, and probably the reason why I'm going to be the last time if I ever go camping, I'm going to sleep underneath the stars. But that is a form of kind of sleep paralysis, or what I mentioned before of, when you look at a being like that, it freezes you like that. And if they catch you in a very vulnerable state as far as for sleeping like that, you're kind of screwed. And, for my senses not being as tuned as it should have been at the time, I let him do all that stuff to me before I even knew he was there or even woke up. So that's something that if you're camping out on the reservation, sleep in your car, sleep in your truck. I know there's a lot of people out there with stories of Yanagloshis coming knocking on your window in the middle of the night when you go to like peyote meetings or something like that. That's actually happened to me too. It's pretty scary. But that's kind of like my story that I'm able to share and tell, because it's a lot less violent as far as for what the elders had permitted me from sharing with the world. But it was very scary, and for them to do that while I was sleeping in such a vulnerable state was just something that I really I want ever to happen to me again. And so I had to go get a ceremony done afterwards, but I'm okay now. I'm all right. That was like about 5-6 years ago and everything. But so that's one of the other stories that I have. So if you guys have any more questions, I'll do my best to try to answer them as best I can. For the ones that I actually can't answer, I'm being filtered here, everybody, for what I can actually share with you guys. So like how I said, I'm not trying to convince anybody that these things are real. You can believe it or not, but I'm just telling you my experiences and the knowledge I know. So I want to thank everybody so much for enjoying that first Skinwalker video. Hopefully soon we'll be at 500,000. So glad you guys are really enjoying it. I'll do my best to try to bring light of this issue, because telling wrong information about Skinwalkers and everything, really that misidentification is kind of pretty bad, and I think we're comfortably at a time to where we all can start to learn a little bit more in depth about the paranormal and supernatural world.
I would like to thank BC Bob on TikTok for the great in-depth look at the Ogopogo last episode. Please check out his posts. I would like to thank Shan Klin for sharing his very personal Skinwalker story. It is very educational for myself and fellow Canadians who travel down south. Please check out his podcast, posts, and videos. I also would like to thank True Crime Talk 03 for his stories and input. See you next time on the Tinfoil Canadian. Until then, stay warm and be nice to your neighbor, eh?